Hello and welcome to the Galaxy G podcast. Today we will have a special guest to talk about a recent antitrust case concerning technology. Android users, listen carefully because we will be covering the Federal Trade Commission versus Qualcomm Inc. Ladies and gentlemen, Todd.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No problem. Let's start here. Explain who you are and what you do.
Hey, I'm Ty. I'm a lawyer for Ty Attorneys, and I'm here to talk about, the FTC versus Qualcomm antitrust case.
What made you interested in law and attorney work?
Well, to be honest, I always loved reading about true crime and watching all these court case holdings on television.
Interesting. So let me ask you, what is the reason that you're invested in this case?
As a side hobby, I'm also a huge technology nerd, and I prefer Android devices when it comes to the mobile device market. I like to study their specs, what goes into the making of a device, and the companies behind the components.
Oh, so you're quite knowledgeable about this stuff.
Well, it's only a hobby thing. I'm a lawyer the majority of the time, though.
All right, then. Well, let's just begin with a general summary of what happened, like a who, what, when, where, and why.
All right, so the case name, as mentioned before, is the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, versus Qualcomm Incorporated. For those who don't know, the FTC, according to their website, is to, quote, protect the public from deceptive or unfair business practices and from unfair methods of competition through law enforcement, advocacy, research, and education. That was a lot of words, but to put it simply, they protect consumers when it comes to trade and business, among other things, hence the word trade in their name, obviously. Qualcomm Incorporated, on the other hand, is a semiconductor company. They make computer chips and stuff, and
Yeah.
they basically produce a wide range of electronic components, and although they're mostly known for their central processing units or CPUs, they do other things as well.
Okay. So why is this important?
Well, let's take a look at this graph. What do you notice?
Well, immediately I see that Qualcomm has the biggest share in the
The application processing revenue share, basically CPUs.
right,
This
right.
case was actually originally filed in 2017 by the FTC, and that's the reason why the case date and the date of this graph, I chose a graph from 2017 show. But basically, we can take a look at it and see that Apple is the only real competition that Qualcomm has. But even then, Apple's more focused on just consumer technology in general, like they make computers and phones, whereas Qualcomm focuses on just CPUs alone and like general chips for computers. MediaTek is also a semiconductor company, just like Qualcomm, although their numbers are nowhere near as big as Qualcomm's. A whopping 42% of the market is controlled by
Oh,
Qualcomm.
so why do you think what got Qualcomm into this position?
Patents, lots and lots of patents. So basically, Qualcomm has a no license, no chips policy. Basically, if a smartphone company, for example, let's say Samsung, wanted to have a Qualcomm chip and a new phone, Samsung would need to purchase a license to use that chip. Now, what makes this dangerous is the fact that since Qualcomm chips are used in so many Android devices, Qualcomm was charging these ridiculously high prices for their chips. And for that, I have another graph right here that I'm going to flash up on the screen right now. Here's another graph worth analyzing.
Okay. So from what it looks like, the performance wise, Apple was on top.
Definitely. But the reason why Apple isn't winning in the AP revenue game, as from the graph before this one, is because their CPUs are exclusive to Apple devices only. And I doubt that Apple's going to let companies like Samsung or Motorola use their CPUs anytime soon. If an Android wants the best performance, then the only company they can really look forward to is Qualcomm. Basically, Qualcomm's the only company that Android phone manufacturers could look to for the next best CPU. This led to very high prices, similar to that of a monopoly, and that brings us to the FTC versus Qualcomm antitrust case.
All right. So basically, Qualcomm in 2017 is dominating the Android smartphone market. And then they're charging smartphone companies ridiculous prices for a license to use their chips.
Correct.
And so the FTC sees this, and what do they think?
They think it's an attempt at a monopoly by Qualcomm.
That's definitely not good for competition, is it?
Definitely not. And so the FTC decides to take action against Qualcomm. They filed a lawsuit against Qualcomm, arguing that Qualcomm's no licenses, no chips policy was monopolistic. And they also argued that this aggressive, quote unquote, aggressive licensing and patenting was against Section 5 of the FTC Act, which is heavily based on Section 2 of the Sherman Act. Long story short, the Sherman Act is basically, and the Section 5 of the FTC Act, they're both antitrust laws, basically trying
Right.
to prevent monopolies from occurring. And this case was originally filed in 2017 for the District Courts of California. We're talking about the Northern District of California. And the trial started in 2019, and in May, the ruling was that the Qualcomm was indeed violating antitrust laws, and so they were ordered to end the policy as part of the ruling.
Oh, so would this mark the end for Qualcomm?
Far from it, actually. Keep in mind that this is January 2019 to May 2019. After the ruling,
Oh,
Qualcomm, this multi-billion-dollar company, was not ready to give up. So guess what?
what?
They appealed the case to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, which is basically the court that has a say over district
Hmm.
courts in the geographical boundary 9. And I'm going to show a little map right here right now that pretty much shows you, all the geographic boundaries of the United States Court of Appeals. And so basically, the Court of the Ninth Circuit is an appellate court, meaning that they only hear cases that are appealed to them.
Time to bring in the big guns, huh?
Definitely. This is what FTC versus Qualcomm is dated July 16, 2019. Before then, the case was filed to the Northern District Court, the state court. Now we're bumping things up nationally to a national level.
Oh, okay. So now the case is in the hands of the Ninth Circuit Affiliate Court of California. So what happens next?
Well, the appellate court reviews the rulings of the district court.
Okay, and what's the outcome of that?
Take a wild guess.
Well, personally, I'd say that the affiliate court ruled in favor of the district's court ruling. And in my opinion, I think that the Qualcomm was definitely making it ridiculously hard for any competition to arise. I mean, the prices, licenses, patents, and essentially dominating the Android smartphone market, it all seems so monopolistic to me.
Believe it or not, the appellate court ruled in favor of Qualcomm.
Wait, how?
I mean, fundamentally, the purpose of a patent is to protect your intellectual property from being copied and exploited. So all these licenses and patents by Qualcomm were just an effort to keep their tech safe from companies like MediaTek and Samsung from copying the latest and the greatest.
Well, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Patent and license are good in a way, but the fact they charge so much for them and the fact that they dominate a decent chunk of the market is monopolistic, wouldn't you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, the fact that they charged high royalties for their products could be viewed as monopolistic, but the appellate court themselves said that simply processing monopoly, and I quote, simply processing, possessing monopoly power and charging monopoly prices does not violate Pact-Bell-Tel.co, basically an act that talks about pricing and monopolies. So basically, what they're trying to say is that, you know, just because you have monopoly prices does not mean that you're actively trying to contribute to a monopoly. So, I mean, take that as you want, but personally, I'm on Qualcomm's side.
Well, this is very interesting, but I thank you for your time to come on my podcast,
Yeah,
and
no
I hope
problem.
you've had a great time. And I thank you for sharing this information with me and to the folks at home, and I hope you guys had a good time listening. Make sure you tune in next time on the Galaxy G podcast. Thank you for tuning in.